Do y'all know those suppers that are just so comforting and are great whether it's winter or spring or summer or fall? That's what this one is to us. Beans and cornbread is just a classic. I grew up on it. I'm serving it now. It's cheap. It's easy. You can get it going in the morning and forget about it. You can make your cornbread early, have it ready to go to just reheat in the oven at supper time. That's why we love it. I keep it fairly simple. I do like to soak our beans first, though, just for easier digestion and actually less cooking time. I don't have to worry about if they're going to be done or not because I've soaked them, and so they most usually are always done. I add a little bit of ham or bacon into our pot of beans, whatever I have. If I have a ham hock, that's great. If I have leftover ham, that's great. And if I have bacon, that is just fine too. Makes for an easy supper. And then you can make your cornbread up early, get it baked, and then have it ready to go. You can even reheat it in the oven to warm it up a bit before, and then that is supper done first thing in the morning. I find with having kids, it is the easiest thing just to have a meal planned out for that day, whether it was planned at the beginning of the week or if I thought while laying in bed the night before, what are we going to have for supper? It is just easiest to have it planned out, get it going in the morning if I can, and then I don't have to think about it the rest of the day. I don't have to hurry up at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, and panic about what we're going to have for dinner or worry about the fact that I didn't start it because it's already done. Those are my favorite kinds of supper because I know that I will have a meal ready. For this cornbread, I always do a cup of flour, a cup of cornmeal, a tablespoon of baking powder, a teaspoon of salt. You could also use self-rising flour. I do that a lot, but I also have the recipe written down, broken down, because this goes really well. This works really well for gluten-free. You can just use an all-purpose gluten-free flour and then just add in your baking powder and your salt. My parents are gluten-free, so I've had to go back and forth on this recipe several times. So this works perfect for that. So you can do the cup of flour, cup of cornmeal, tablespoon of baking powder, or a teaspoon of salt, or replace that with self-rising flour and a cup of cornmeal, or your self-rising cornmeal, do 2 cups. Then I add half a cup of sugar. This is optional. We like sugar in ours. A cup of buttermilk, 3 eggs, and a half a cup of melted butter. It has lots of eggs and fat in it. That way it is nice and soft and fluffy. No dry cornbread over here. I just bake that at 350. I like to stick my pan in the oven with a tablespoon of butter while it preheats and while I make my batter, and then I just pull that out and dump my batter in, and it's already, the dish is greased down. I bake it for 20 to 25 minutes or until it is nice and browned. Doesn't this look super good? This is one of my favorite suppers to make. Now, with that being said, it is not my husband's favorite supper. He likes it, it's fine, but he is more of a meat kind of guy. And so, to soften it up a bit, I made a batch of old-fashioned no-bake cookies. I don't know if these are popular where y'all live or where you're from, but these are one of the most popular cookies in my area. Anytime there's a bake sale, anytime there's an event, there are always no-bake cookies, and they are always pretty much the first to go, but people are very particular about their no-bakes. It cracks me up how particular people are. If you don't do it just the right way, they don't look just the right way, people will not buy them and will not eat them, and it is just so funny. People are funny. For ours, we use an old recipe that was passed down through my mom's family, so you can see my old little cookbook here, and it I've marked in it and written out exactly what to do because I usually make a double batch. And so I have it completely perfected for how we like it and how I make them anytime I take them to a function. So if you would like my recipe, I do 2 cups of sugar, a 1/4 cup of cocoa, half a cup of milk, and here I'm using goat's milk, but you can use any milk, half a cup of butter, and a teaspoon of vanilla. You put that in your pan, bring it to a boil, let it boil for a minute, no more, no less, and the boil starts not at a rolling boil, but when you get it to where it's just starting to bubble. Once it boils for a minute, remove it from the heat. Then I add a 1/4 cup of peanut butter, 3 cups of oats, and stir that in until it's melted, and then just put tablespoonfuls onto some wax paper, parchment paper, whatever you have. Now, if you double this, which I almost always do, I didn't here, but I usually do. If you double this, you don't increase the boil time. You still do it for the minute. If you do, they will be dry and chalky, and they will have a white film on the outside from being overcooked. You want to let these cool for a good long while so that they set up, unless you're like us and you sneak little pieces in between while they're still warm. Once I made these, I realized I was running low on my homemade vanilla. This is something I like to always keep, and I especially like to make sure I get some made in the spring because it can take 4 to 6 months or longer for it to really fully infuse. And so I had vanilla beans. I was just waiting for this. I had the vodka that I needed, and so I am starting this here. And I have been hearing about these vanilla mother jars, so I decided to make my own. I took my old beans, put them in a larger jar, filled that with vodka just to cover it. If y'all have a mother jar, I would be happy to hear how you do yours. Now, this may or may not be a good idea, but I always try and keep a tablecloth on my table here on this island. I don't like the tabletop. It needs redone. And so I had been washing them over and over and over. So I grabbed this one from the store. This is one of those vinyl, like, picnic table, picnic style tablecloths. So this might look cheesy, but my idea is that I can just wash it down instead of having to wash it in the washing machine every single day, which we'll see. It looks a little cheesy, but right now it is okay. For lunch, my mom had a big old bag of frozen chicken thighs that she was thawing because she needed to get them used up. We're trying to clean out our freezers to prepare for garden season. And she had this big old bag of frozen chicken thighs, and she had to cook them all at once because they were all frozen together. So she thawed them all out and said, I'm going to cook these chicken thighs. Do you want some? And you never turn that down. Cooked chicken that someone else cooks for you. You never turn it down. So I said, I will take a couple pieces. And so we ate that twice in one day to get it used up. And so the first thing that I made was open face chicken salad sandwiches. I had tried a brown bread recipe. There used to be this old steakhouse in our town, and it was a local steakhouse. They were so good. We went there all the time when I was a kid, and then it burnt down once I was into adulthood. And they used to serve this certain bread warm and with pinto beans. And so ever since we had the beans earlier in the week, I have been craving this bread. And I didn't know exactly if theirs was like a whole wheat. I can remember what it tastes like and what it looked like, but I didn't know specifically what it was. So I didn't know if it was like a honey whole wheat or what, but I found a recipe for a steakhouse brown bread, and I thought, let's try that and see if it's close. And it was like spot on the way I remember it. Again, I was a kid, so we'll see. And so I sliced that up. I added some homemade mayo that I made, adding an egg, a cup of oil, a splash of mustard, some salt, and some lemon juice. I just threw all that into a mason jar and used my immersion blender to turn that into mayo. I added salt and pepper to the chicken salad and some chopped up pickles. Sometimes I like to add eggs. Sometimes I like to add grapes. Just depends on what I have. I added some pepper to the top of that because I really love black pepper on everything. And then I went out and cut some fresh herbs from my little planters on the front porch to put on top. This is the exact reason that I planted those, and that's what I was talking about in the last video, where I could run out really quickly and just grab some for supper or lunch if I so wanted to. going along on that herb theme, I have been steeping these herbs from last year that we had dried and grew in some vinegar. I've been making my own. I'm calling it homemade Mrs. Myers, even though I think you're not supposed to say that. And making all my own cleaner. So I made a rose scented one, and at Christmas I made an orange and clover scented one, and so this one is a garden herb. And so all this is that I've been doing is half vinegar, half water, and the vinegar I usually have steeped in like rose petals or orange and clove and cinnamon, or this one I did the herbs, and I mixed that together. The last batch I added some cornstarch to. You can add scrubbing power, but this one I did not. And then I just add some oil to it. So this time I'm using an essential oil, a rosemary essential oil. It is very menthol-y, kind of like a eucalyptus-y smell. But I usually use some form of like a fragrance oil, which I know is not the best, but I'm making all my homemade stuff, and so adding one ingredient to me that makes me happy and adds a little bit of joy isn't too far off from how I function in the rest of my life. I'm very middle ground. This cleaner is still better than all of the chemicals that they put in a store-bought cleaner, or probably even Mrs. Myers itself. And so I will take that form of balance. This smelled so clean after. It kind of had a, like I said, a menthol-y smell, and this works great on stainless steel. This works great on glass. This works great on countertops. The only thing I would be leery of is any stone countertops that you have. I would be careful on that. I don't have them, so I don't actually know if it would work on them. So, try it on a small test spot if you choose to do so. I also use this on all of our wood furniture and tables, and it works great. Of course, I had to give my kitchen a nice cleanup after that. Oh, there's a blue jay out here. I'm out on the back porch because my kids were a bit rowdy. And so I wanted some quiet, so you can probably hear the birds behind me. Probably should have said that in the beginning of the video. Anyway, also had another project. So in a video a while back, I made a tallow cream. It was a very thick whipped tallow cream. I made this tallow cream, and I wanted something a little bit thinner, more like a lotion. So I am remelting it down and adding in a bit more oil, and I'm adding a rose infused oil, so I get some rose petal benefits, some rose benefits out of that for my skin. It also has honey in it to soothe it, and a few other things besides the oils and the tallow that's in there. And then I also added some rose oil to it as well to give it a nice little perfumey scent. Now, this looks kind of funny that I did this, but I planted some zinnias in these pots too, and they were just starting to look sad. I think they just needed cut sooner than I cut them. And zinnias are I can't remember what they're called, cut and grow again, or whatever they're called, where the more you cut, the more they bloom. So you'll get more flowers the more you cut them. And so these were looking rough. I've been watering them how I normally do, and for some reason they're just not taking off. So I decided to go ahead and cut them and see if that would give them a little spurt of energy to keep growing. And I did put these in the house. Lastly is supper. This was supposed to be an easy supper, but once I got in there, I wanted to make alfredo noodles. And once I got into my pantry, I realized I didn't even have any noodles. So this is not something I normally would do. I do make noodles, but normally it is well planned in advance. Normally if I went in there and noticed I didn't have what I would need, I would kind of change course and do a different meal. But on this day, I was really wanting it. We already had the pre-cooked chicken, so I didn't have to cook any chicken. This Alfredo sauce is pretty simple, and so I said, let me just make some homemade noodles. It'll make it that much better. So my homemade noodles are a cup of flour, which I did 2 cups here. So one batch is a cup of flour, 2 eggs, and I think it was half a teaspoon of salt. It's half the salt, as far as the number goes, to the flour and double the eggs to the flour. So half a teaspoon of salt, a cup of flour, 2 eggs. And so I did that, but times 2 to make enough noodles for us. The Alfredo sauce is just some butter in a pan, and I fried up our chicken a little bit before to get it a little bit crispier, because that's how we like it. And I added in some flour. So then I added in some flour to that to create a little roux, and then added in my cream. Once I did that, I melted in some Parmesan and a couple of handfuls of this homemade mozzarella that I made from our goat's milk a little while ago, and let that all melt together and thicken up. The longer you cook it, the more melty the cheese will get, and so it'll be more sauce-like and less clumpy, sticky, stringy cheese. So I just let that cook down for a little bit, added some more of those fresh herbs, parsley and basil, that I picked from our front porch planter. So this meal was pretty farm to table, not completely. The chicken was not from our farm, even though we are looking to do that soon. The eggs that are in the noodles, and then the noodles are from scratch. The milk in the sauce, the herbs in the sauce are from our farm. So this was pretty close to home. There is the brown bread again. We are still eating on that.